Today's guest is a true powerhouse in inspection readiness.
For me, I would define inspection readiness pretty much as being able to tell the story. We always say TMF needs to tell the story. It needs to be the single source of truth. They're looking for evidence of control, not perfection. Things are messy. If you don't have your documents in your TMF, what good is a metric, right? They can look back to day one of your study, and they probably will. And so all of it is important, all the way from the first day. Make your trackers. Start them right now. Start them today. Make it a Friday activity. I don't know, but whatever. Make your trackers.
TMF Elite, today's guest is a true powerhouse in inspection readiness. Chad Scribner is a senior consultant at Epista Life Sciences with a dual master's in clinical research and business administration. He's navigated sponsors, CROs, and biopharma companies across preclinical to phase 4 studies. From gene therapy to ultra-rare disease and vaccines, he's mastered GCP, GDP, and Veeva Vault eTMF management, turning these complex operations into audit-ready success. TMF Elite, get ready to learn from someone who set the standard in inspection readiness. Chad, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I am so excited for our conversation today. It's a hot topic. Everybody loves to be what they say inspection ready. And when you say inspection readiness, like what does that actually mean? And how do you separate the hype from that real world sort of execution?
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question, isn't it? What is inspection readiness? Everyone knows they needs it, and how do they do it exactly? For me, I would define inspection readiness pretty much as being able to tell the story. We always say TMF needs to tell the story. It needs to be the single source of truth. But that's really inspection readiness. Yes, we are in a regulated industry. There are standards to be met. I think the regulations can be thought as the minimum standard, but it's a standard nonetheless. And I think in just research in general, it is a science. We are doing science. It is a scientific discipline, meaning part of that, it needs to be reproducible. Someone should be able to take a TMF, different company, different whatever, and figure out what you did and reproduce it. Similar to a lab experiment or a recipe, we need to be able to reproduce it. I think another aspect of inspection readiness, specifically with ICH GCP E6R3, really puts it on the sponsor to be in control. And to have specific oversight of the aspect of the trial, which includes record keeping. I think it's important to note, as far as inspection specifically, they're looking for evidence of control, not perfection. A study is a study. Things are messy with an increased reliance on, let's say, vendors, third parties. That evidence of control and oversight is more important than ever.
And what do you think like those biggest challenges with this ICH GCP E6R3 is from the sponsors? Because there's more weight over there now.
I think part of it is just kind of doing it, and kind of just jumping in and making a decision. It might not be 100% correct. It might not be the best decision, but ICH as a guideline is giving the sponsors kind of the green light to go ahead and say, try it. Whatever risk you are willing to accept and take on, depending on your program or study. Maybe a high value asset, they might take on less risk than a different asset. But it needs to come from documenting it very clearly and being able to articulate any decisions that are made.
Walk me through like your risk-based approach to TMF reviews. Like, how do you decide what truly matters and what doesn't?
Well, that depends on where you are, I guess, in the study. If we're planning for, let's say, a submission or inspection, you got to start with the low hanging fruit. I'm very big on that approach. You don't want to overcomplicate anything. So, very basic documents, 1572s, financial disclosure forms, IRB approvals, IP logs, DOA logs, things like that, study plans. There is in the end of ICH, E6R3, in one of the, I think it's Appendix C, they have a list of essential records. And those are just the minimum essential records. And that's a really good place to start. Also, the regulations sometimes call out documents. So depending on what, if you know what type of specific regulatory agency you're going to be dealing with, you can look up those and figure out what maybe they're going to be looking for as well. I think part of inspection readiness as well, it takes a collaborative effort and a cross-functional approach, because if you're someone in a records group, you might not know exactly where the risks lie in a study. And the study team has all of that knowledge that you don't have. And that can be really valuable. So that's another key aspect, is that communication and the cross-functional approach can go a long way.
So there's sort of like two types of people in our industry. And there's the ones that want to collect everything, like
Sure,
everything's high risk.
sure.
And then you've got the people who are, I don't want to say laid back, but less is more. It tells the story.
Yep,
You know what I'm trying to
yep.
say?
You get
There's
people, yeah, more either letter of the law or spirit of the law, right?
both ends of the spectrum. How do we meet in the middle?
That's a good question. Again, I think it takes that collaboration, right? There's maybe really no wrong answer, um, right? And I think it comes down to what I mentioned earlier, is just documenting the risk, right? The reference model does have core and recommended artifacts, right? And now going to be record types, I think. So you can go off that. That is kind of that standard of essential documents. Again, there is essential document list in ICH GCP, right? I think it just at the end of the day needs to be documented. We've seen CVs, every 2 years, every 3 years, right? That they expire. And it's like, okay, well, tell me that. Where did you come up with that? Where is that in the guidance? Where is that in a regulation? And it's nowhere. It's just, I don't know if that, where that actually really started from, but there's nowhere, anywhere that I can find in writing other than maybe a company policy or a plan that says you need to do that. Now, if it isn't a plan or a policy, then by all means do it, because that's another part of inspection readiness, is just following your process, right? That's another big thing, especially for GCP audits, is following your process. So I think it's the TMF group historically has maybe not been in the corner, but it's always a back burner thing. And I think to really do the risk, right, proportionate stuff correct, and do what ICH E6R3 is telling us, it's going to take a more forward outward approach, I think, from everyone, but including the TMF groups as well. Maybe we need to speak a little louder. I don't know.
I love the example that you gave of the CV every 2 to 3 years, signed, dated. Are we losing credibility here? Or what's more important, an updated medical license?
Yes, yes, there's an opportunity cost with everything in the TMF, right? And yeah, signed. That's another thing. I think FDA has a guidance. They don't need to be signed. They flat out said that they don't need to be signed, but you get a tech QC and it'll fail because it's not signed. And that's wasted effort. And I think maybe that's where, these guidance documents are coming out from the regulators and ICH, that we don't want you spending effort on that. That's not a value added activity for you to be doing in the TMF, because there's so many other, more critical things you could be doing. And that doesn't mean full blown risk assessments or validation of things. It's still the basic stuff of, like you said, medical licenses, financial disclosure forms, maybe making sure we're following our plans, maybe going through our study mailbox and filing emails. I would, those have always kind of just historically been on the back burner too. And An email can definitely be an essential record depending on what it is. So let's get those in there. Let's go back to the basics and, focus on what we really just absolutely need in the TMF.
I think you're right. We overcomplicate it because we're just so, I don't know, we got our eye at the end, but let's just go back to the basics.
Yes.
Like it's not rocket science.
Yes, I am a big proponent of going back to the basics. Again, quality metrics, timeliness metrics, completeness metrics, all that's great. But if you don't have your documents in your TMF, what good is a metric, right? Or what good is maybe establishing a 90% tech UC threshold? That's great. That sounds nice. You can justify a document all you want, but if you're not getting documents in, then what's the point? What are you running metrics on if you don't have the documents in there? One uh, maybe a few years ago, there was I think it was the CEO of Syneos at the time, Alistair, and there was a town hall, and he made a comment that he sat in on inspections and they're missing the most basic of documents. And it's like, he made the comment in this town hall, said, just do the basics, just get them in there, right? And that kind of stuck with me because it's like, yeah, we do just need, that's the first step, right? And as these trials get more complex, as more things get outsourced, as we have an increase in technology, right? TMS software is getting more complicated. Are we losing that, right? Are we stepping away from just the basic of getting documents in there? And I don't know what the best way is to, that's tough too. That's another $1 million question is how do we just get our documents in there?
How do you get study teams to operate in that inspection ready mindset right from day one? Like, not just when an audit's looming.
Right. Right. Or a submission or, yep. Right. Um, I think part of it has to come from the top down, really. And you don't see that, and you don't see TMF from the beginning. I think there was a presentation at CDIS about TMF from the start, and it went all the way back to like RFPs and all the line items on how we're going to budget for TMF, and it's it needs to be like thought of that far ahead, and it's not. And I think part of it too is for study teams to be not handheld, but guided, early, maybe goals, weekly, monthly goals, something that can be tracked. You need repeatable metrics for the study teams. Again, everyone puts it on the back burner, right? But like from day one specifically too, I think I read a finding, I don't know which agency or where it came from, but the TMF plan wasn't established early enough. And that was a finding because they were just throwing stuff in there. And, from the regulatory perspective, they weren't in control, right? They weren't in control of the TMF from day one. And I think that's another thing to realize and get these study teams to understand is it's not just the last 6 months or a year from when you're going to submit or, oh, well, that's way down the line. That's not going to be my problem or that's in the future. They can look back to day one of your study and they probably will. And so all of it is important all the way from the first day.
I absolutely agree. It's definitely just not worth scrambling at the end. It costs you so much time and money and headaches. It's just not worth it. So, TMF documentation versus the TMF storyboard. Like,
Right.
why does this distinction matter and how can it make or break an inspection?
So your TMF or TMF overall is obviously just going to be your source of truth, just in Veeva Vault or whatever platform you use. Your inspector could get direct access, right? That's a possibility. More with EMA image array. But your storyboard is more of an internal document, and that's meant to supplement the TMF documentation and to try to tell the story outside of the TMF, right? And that can include a lot of different things. They've seen a lot of different storyboards. They could be specifically just for an inspection. They could be for the entire length of the trial. But part of it is key decisions. And everyone really doesn't think an email is important, right? Because, oh, it's just an email and yeah, it's in my Outlook for maybe a year or who knows how long, right? The retention policy is, but well, it'll be there. I can just search it up later. And that's not always the case. And so maybe that's where the storyboard comes in. And part of the risk too is maybe a study team is really good at documenting on a storyboard, but not taking that last step and putting the documentation in the TMF, right, to support the storyboard. It should be a give and take, right? Um, and so they can get in trouble where maybe they are documenting the storyboard, but they have no proof. There's no proof at the end of the day that maybe that decision was made or those discussions were had, or the decision came from the sponsor, not the CRO, or vice versa. So there really needs to be that link between the two. They should complement each other.
It makes me think of in clinical research, people come, people go. The emails from the people who are no longer with the company kind of get lost in the sauce. And then where's that documentation? Where was that email?
Yeah, it's really tough because generally, when someone leaves, their outlook is kind of gone, right? It just disappears, and so you're not only losing those emails, but you're losing the study knowledge, right? You're losing that firsthand account of what happened. And for some of these studies, it's a risk if they're 5, 10 years long, potentially. And one person isn't going to stay for 10 years. That's not a realistic expectation, right? Generally. So especially with how large teams are nowadays, you have to develop some sort of transition checklist. Again, storyboard. It goes back to the process too, right? You need to ingrain that in just the everyday, and that's where that comes in. No one wants to leave and just disadvantage the next person coming in, or the team that they worked with for so long. They don't mean to hurt them or leave them in a bad way, but it just sometimes kind of happens, right? And I think that's where the process is really important. You need to track, right? We track study team details, even PI changes, right? Um, Transition checklists, right? And those should be part of a storyboard. Those should be part of the TMF documentation. This person left. This person, did this checklist, and there's a knowledge transfer. But those checklists can be fairly essential, to ensure that everything is getting carried on.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears a little bit. You've been chatting about the C disc. And you work with the C disc on the TMF risk based approach training material.
Yep.
So, what's the game changing insight that every team should just apply immediately?
So I will vaguely answer that question because I will I will be presenting at the next, not the December one, I think it's in March or April, the next CETUS general meeting about the risk-based approach training. So there's the white paper, the tool, and the training component. The white paper and the tool are released. So those have been out. The training program is what I will be discussing with a few other volunteers at the Q1 general meeting. I will say what you should be implementing right now is really looking at a risk assessment, some sort of risk assessment. It needs to be done. There is the tool. It's a very nice Excel sheet. If you've seen it, it's free. There's a download. It's a very good exercise to be able to do, and I think everyone really needs to, because that's the guidance. That's what we're being told all the time is, okay, if you want to do risk assessment or risk-based approaches on things, you need an assessment, right? You need to document why you think that is, right? Or what your program risks are, or study risks, or whatever. I think we need to take a more either program or study specific approach. So I will say the slides, when we were developing the training, we wanted to incorporate like case studies and examples or exercises into the training. And part of that was looking at maybe a couple different study types, right? Is it global? Is it single country? Is it a phase 3? Is it phase 1? Is it, how important is this asset, right? I think that was one of the key things that I had kind of taken away from that training was, even what's the endpoints? What's the endpoints in the study, right? And you really should make sure you have the documentation to back up that information, because that's the whole goal of what you're doing. So that was, I think, one of the key takeaways that I had, because the training pulled a lot from the white paper and the tool. So, though we had tried to keep that consistent, as our source material. And so, I would really just say, just do what you can with the white paper and the tool, and get into it. And to remember that there's no wrong answers with your assessments. They just want to see that it's done, right? Like what I talked about at the beginning of the podcast was, they're not looking for perfection. They're just looking for control, right? So did you do an assessment? And maybe they won't necessarily agree with you on it, but if that's a company decision that was made, then that was the decision that was made, and you can back it up and speak to it. So I think another part of it too is establish a QC plan, right? TMF QC plan, establish those limits, whatever they want to be. They could be 98%, 90%, 80%, whatever you think it should be. You can go ahead and do that. Not to over rely on tech QC and the quality part of it. But that's another component of the training, is maybe see, come up with it. And, nothing is set in stone either. If your assessment changes or your metrics change, or maybe you're evaluating your metrics and you say, okay, we're this continuous improvement, we need to alter this or drop this, or we can be more lenient here. It's the stuff is fluid, but you got to get started. And I think that's the hardest part.
So there was a couple things you said. One made me really chuckle. Is like, we're not looking for perfection, but people who work in the TMF, we are type A perfectionists. And we beat ourselves up if there's a
Yes,
mistake. We're not letting it go.
right. Yeah. It's learning for everyone, right? It's
Right.
learning for everyone. And that, the TMF is not going to be perfect, even though we want it to be, and we try really hard and we implement really great processes and metrics. But at the end of the day, it's just not. And part of that is the size and complexity of these trials nowadays. It's not feasible, to do that. So it's a mind shift, change, right? And that's why I think the best thing is just dive in and exercise that muscle of maybe letting things go a little bit.
And then you also said something that was really important, that it's not set in stone. I think
Right.
we have the mindset of, okay, I've done this, check.
Hmm.
And then, or I'm afraid to go back and fix it because what if I get dinged because I caught a mistake, or maybe something needed to be moved around a little bit? We're sort of afraid to go back.
I agree with you on that, and that's tough to do, especially when you're talking, probably metrics or documents or a review. Um, you know, you want to be in control, right? And that's what it comes back to. So if you establish 90% and you're not meeting that, or maybe you are and you want to go more strict, go ahead. That's fine. You can just do the assessment again, right? You're in control. You're running your metrics, right? Your rollover metrics month after month. You're analyzing them. You're looking at them. That shows some thought, right, behind what you're doing, and that's, again, part of the control, and that's what is being looked for. So yeah, it's tough, but it's tough. We can talk about it, but it's hard to do in practice,
Mhm.
right?
Which metrics or KPIs separate the teams that are truly inspection ready from the teams that are sort of, I don't know, hopeful?
This is tough because everyone talks about inspection readiness at the end. They don't see the monthly, day-to-day metrics as inspection readiness metrics, but they are. Obviously, you have quality, timeliness, completeness. I think other metrics that need to be considered, especially with E6R3, is, your audit trail reviews. That was a big topic that also came up at CDISC. It was a very nice presentation. Audit trail reviews. I think part of it also is TMF access. It's another thing, and those kind of go hand in hand. But I won't talk too much. I mean, this quality, timeless, completeness is always, the three-legged stool kind of thing. I think some hidden ones that really need to be addressed is TMF access. You don't need someone who has uploader access and hasn't uploaded thing in 6 months or a year. You're not in control. You're not in control of your TMF, right? That's not a restricted thing. So you can run metrics or KPIs. You can run, either by organization or a login history report, and that should be part of your metrics. That should be part of your standards, right? That's called out in the regulations that access needs to be controlled. So you should have a metric on that, right? I think a metric that has maybe is the hardest is TMF completeness. We always see that generally as a percent, but what does that mean, right? And what is missing? And is it critical documents? Is it low risk documents? Is it going to impact any data integrity? Is it going to impact rights, well-being, safety of patients? There's a lot you can do. I think if you don't have metrics or you're rethinking metrics, keep it simple. Keep it very simple. We, like you said, TMF group, we're type A, we know our stuff, right? Not everybody else does, believe it or not. We are a very small group. We know our stuff, but not everybody else does. And I think it's really important to provide a lot of guidance early, right? If I write the first time metric is 95%, what does that mean, right? Is that good? Is that bad? Where's the green, yellow, red? I think it would go a long way, especially for the study teams, to keep it as simple as possible. Sometimes even people are maybe a little afraid to speak up, or they don't know what they don't know, right? So I think keeping a lot of your metrics as simple as possible is a very effective way to engage your study team, which is what we want, right? They don't want to just sit through the TMF metrics portion on a study call and kind of zone out, or that's their email checking time, right? So you need to keep it engaging, keep it simple, and don't overcomplicate it. Because again, we need the documents in. That's it.
Let's shift gears and talk about global studies. And global trials can sometimes bring global headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you balance the varying regulatory expectations while keeping that consistent inspection ready standard?
I think you need to embed it in your process, for one. I think ICH GCP is a guidance, but it's very comprehensive. There's a lot of overlap, specifically with inspection readiness. Some of it is kind of regulation agnostic, where you're going to need this document no matter what, right? Or no matter whatever regulatory body you're going to be dealing with. You're probably going to need that. Again, I think that's just my advice, is just trying to keep the basics. Don't get lost in the weeds sometimes, because I can guarantee you there's things that I could find that it doesn't matter what regular inspection you're going to have, it's going to be a finding. So I don't know if a lot of the study teams or trials are there yet. I think it's important, though, if you do know your specific regulatory inspection coming up, that you prepare for that accordingly. But a lot of it is, you can't go wrong with ICH GCP, focusing on that. Start there, start at the essential list at the end, and that will go a long way.
That's good advice right there, because the ICH GCP, that's sort of the golden standard globally.
Right. Globally. Right. Yes. And it's public information, right? And that's the other thing. It shouldn't be a secret. And usually, you do an ICH GCP training and, some onboarding or whatever with the company. Usually they have those, but it's not a secret. They're telling you what they want to see, and they don't want it too constrictive where it limits how you do business, right? So there's that flexibility between the company or sponsor or CRO, whomever, should be able to operate and to be able to perform the trial, but there still needs to be that standard, right? But the regulations and ICH is not meant to be overly restrictive, which I think is something to think about as well.
What's your go-to strategy for spotting gaps in TMF completeness before an inspector does?
First thing is you need the basics, right? And again, it's going to be a risk-based approach, but you need your 1572s or equivalent, right? Your FPS, IRB approvals, stuff like that. What's called out in the regulations. I like to check SIV report if there's a closeout report, if we're doing a site review, right? Those are loads of information. Specific plans if I want to go that far into a review because I don't have the study knowledge, right? So all I can go off of is what I can find and to connect all, the web, a diagram of where these documents all connect with each other, right? That is going to be very important. Again, SIV, closeout visit, those are two huge reports. Any CAPAs or deviations that were performed or done. I think the regulators are catching on to if you said you did something, you really should do it. Or repeat action items in a report, and that's 3-4 times. Or you said you did a CAPA, but then maybe you didn't, or you sat on it, or maybe you didn't really put in a good effort into it. That is all very important. Again, it depends on maybe what type of inspection or what level, but a site level, um, it needs to connect and you need to do what you said you did. And it's not that hard in theory, right? It's pretty easy, right? If the monitoring report says to do this, did you do that? Right? Or the plan. But it happens. And that's part of the people process technology, but that's the people aspect of it, right? Did we do what we did? Or is there checks and balances to make sure, they did what they were supposed to do, right? So a lot of it is plans, monitoring reports, making sure everything was done like it should be, and all of your essential records that are just laid out for you in a list. You can pull it up, make a tracker, and go through your essential list, and you'll find something. I guarantee you, you'll find something on that ICH GCP list that you don't have, right? So, part of it too, if we're looking at gaps of, you're talking complete. You mentioned completeness, right? Or yeah, I would say you need trackers, not just identifying gaps in the TMF completeness, but just in general, especially if you have, like we mentioned, global sites and maybe hundreds of sites, tens of countries. I think you need some sort of tracking mechanism. EDLs are available. Those get kind of a love-hate relationship. They're good and bad. They're good and bad. Don't get me wrong. They have their purpose, but there are too many times where it's okay. We have an inspection. Let's see your trackers. Oh, we needed trackers. It's like, yeah, you really did, because how do you know? How can you possibly keep track of everything? Part of it too. Storyboard, like we mentioned previously, right? The storyboard is going to tell the story. So if there is maybe an issue or a high risk item in a storyboard, or the storyboard says, hey, we did X, Y, and Z. Okay, I want to see that, right? I want to see that in the TMF. So the storyboard is very valuable as well to get some insight into the TMF. And if you are maintaining storyboards, and that's great, double check that you have the supporting documents, right? Or a link to the supporting document for that item is really important. So that's another strategy, is if there is a storyboard, those are very valuable to look at.
So let's say I'm a CTA or an eTMF specialist, and I'm reading that SIV report that you just mentioned, and there's some pending action items.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, great. I know there's some things pending. How are we keeping track other than just going back and reading the SIV report? Am I creating my own tracker? Is the CRA got a tracker?
There's always placeholders, right? And so placeholders can either be expected documents or known missing documents, right? They can be kind of used two different ways. There is an option for that. To me, I don't, not that I necessarily don't care who creates the tracker or is tracking it, but someone should, right? Either, okay, let's say if the sponsor doesn't want to track it, that's fine. Make the CRO or ask the CRO to track it, but make sure they're doing it, right? So the two key things: either sponsor should be doing it, right, as their oversight, or delegate it to a third party, but you still have to provide oversight of that. And that's maybe where it gets disconnected, where there is no third party oversight. The sponsor just says, well, that's the CRO's job because they're the monitors. They should be tracking that. They need to tell me. Well, the inspector isn't going to care because that's the sponsor's responsibility. So they don't care if you delegated it or not. You need oversight either way. So to answer your question, I guess it just depends on maybe what the sponsor is able to do, right? If the specialist is probably worried about other things, maybe they don't have the time or resources to create all these trackers, especially if you're a small biotech or something, and that's a risk, right? But you document that and say, we don't have the people resource. We're going to have the CRO track this, but maybe we need a monthly call or a monthly setup or some sort of goal and oversight to provide the CRO.
Let's chat about training. We know it's critical, and a lot of teams kind of forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you make inspection readiness training stick and actually sort of change the behaviors?
Again, I think it needs a top-down approach. Like I mentioned before, you need the green light to say this is not or no longer a back burner activity, right? This needs to be at the forefront. I always think experience is the best training. Mock audits, mock questions, role playing. Go to your site team. Okay, where's this document? Where do you keep this? Or, here's your storyboard. Do you have one? Or if an inspector asks for an SOP, where is it? Or a type of document. I think that's maybe the best way, but it's very hard to roll that into just your everyday operations. But I think it needs a top-down support, and it needs to be part of a culture thing. I know that's been discussed a lot is, TMF culture. Some companies do it better than others. I think Pfizer's motto is audit ready every day, right? That's embedded in their culture. That's just a company culture thing. It really needs more support. And I think maybe even the TMF group maybe needs to just speak a little louder and say, this is important. You can't put me on the back burner because this is inevitable to have an inspection. This isn't just something in the future that may or may not happen. It will happen, but sometimes it's just more effort maybe from the top down, and maybe specifically from TMF groups, and get more embedded with the study teams instead of just maybe some separate group.
If you could just give maybe one single non-negotiable piece of advice to study teams about staying inspection ready for the life of the trial, like what would it be?
Make your trackers. Start them right now. Start them today. Make it a Friday activity. I don't know, but whatever. Make your trackers. Whatever it is. It doesn't. Even if it's just a protocol versions. That's fine. That's fine. At least it's something. At least it's some sort of oversight on something. You get your. It's a start. Make a hybrid storyboard. Tracker combo. But that's my biggest advice. It's just to start there and make it a healthy habit.
So at the end of the show, I always ask my guests these two questions. And the first one is, what is your favorite TMF document or record now, and why?
Oh, my favorite record. I have to go back to probably the SIV report. I think it has the most documentation. It has the most information. It really kickstart, the site. And I think it's SIV report. Yeah, underappreciated.
And lastly, what's the best career advice you've ever received, and who's it by?
Ooh, the best career advice. I will say in general, especially for TMF, is learn all you can, but your network and the people that teach you matter. I had a really great boss that really taught me a lot, pretty much everything in TMF. And that was just how you get started. And you roll with it, and your network and your training and the people that you interact with and learn from matter. So pick the right people and get with the right people, especially in this tiny TMF group. It'll go a long way.
Chad, thank you so much for being on the TMF Daily Podcast. I'm so grateful for you carving out time, sharing your knowledge. I know I got a lot of value, and our viewers are definitely going to get a lot of value out of this.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Been a fan of your channel, so it was great to be able to come on here. Appreciate it.